Hello and welcome to the Angling Flaneurs. Today we're continuing on our Berlin adventure and explore. We're starting our journey just south of Berlin Cathedral and we'll be moving all the way up the river, past the Tiergarten and then coming back again. The brick building to the right that we just passed is the home of the Mayor of Berlin. And we'll see some amazing architecture along the way, both old and new. Berlin Cathedral, or the Berliner Dome, isn't actually a cathedral, but there's been a site of worship here going back to the 1400s. As we showed in an earlier video, the building took much damage in the Second World War as a result of Allied bombing. Further damage to the cathedral took place in 1975, this time from the East Berlin authorities, and I believe the northern wing was destroyed as it had a Hall of Honour there for the Hohenzollern dynasty, who I believe had connections to the Nazis, and this was very much the modus operandi for the East Berlin authorities, who wanted to destroy any connections to the Nazis. I believe the East German authorities did allow some rebuilding to take place in the 1980s, and I think that was financed by the West German government. To our left we can see the Humboldt Forum, and this is connected to Berlin University, but here was the site of the former Palace der Republik that housed the East German Parliament Volkshammer. We can see a picture of this same location from the early 1980s. The Palace der Republik was the showcase building for the DDR, and we talked about it in one of our previous videos about Berlin and the DDR Museum. We're just about to go under the famous Karl Liebknecht Bridge. Karl Liebknecht was a famous Berlin communist who was involved in the Spartacus uprising of 1919, but was killed in that same year by his political opponents. We can see a map of our journey today, as I said, starting just south of the Berliner Cathedral, and ending up just past the Tiergarten and coming back again, and we have some real treats in store for us. To our left we can see the famous Bode Museum, which houses antiquities and has an ancient art collection. I should give a little information about the River Spree where we're on now. The Spree is about 250 miles in length and is a main tributary of the River Havel. The Spree joins Berlin at Spandau on the western side of the city. A little mention on the Havel: it does flow into the Elbe, Elbe being one of the major European rivers and forming a natural barrier pre-1989 between East and West Germany. On the left hand side shortly we'll see the famous Bode Museum. Now this was built from 1898 to 1904 by the order of the German Emperor William II. Now the museum today is on the UNESCO World Heritage List because of its outstanding architecture and testimony to the development of the museum as a cultural phenomenon. The museum has a collection of sculptures, coins and world-class Byzantine art. The museum itself suffered from the Allied bombing in April 1945, and I believe that more than 400 paintings and about 300 sculptures were missing, either through to looting or from the fire from the bombing. The building coming up on the left hand side has a dark and sinister history. I believe it was the offices of Hermann Göring and the Luftwaffe during the period of the Nazis. Whilst we meander along the river just before we come to the German government buildings and the Reichstag, there's two books I'd like to talk to you about that are worth reading, all about Berlin. The first one is Lutz Sieler's Stern 111. This book describes post-reunification Berlin in the 1990s, with all the hopes and aspirations and the problems that came with it. The other book, Alfred Dobbins' Berlin Alexanderblatt, takes us back to the cabaret period of the 1920s in Berlin, which was very decadent. And against this wonderful liberalism, we see the rise of the Communist Party and then the rise of the Nazi Party, with much tension politically occurring in Berlin, as we mentioned in previous videos, with many street fights and much political violence occurring during that decade. 1920s Berlin was a wild city on many different levels. Some parts good and some parts not so good. We're now seeing our first view of the famous Reichstag dome. This was constructed to really celebrate reunification and was designed by the architect Norman Foster. Norman Foster's masterpiece is meant to emphasise Berlin's attempt to move away from its Nazi past and towards the future of a united democratic Germany. It's meant to symbolise that people are above the government, as was not the case during the 1930s and 40s under Nazism. The dome has a 360-degree view, and you're meant to be able to look down on it to the debating chamber of the German's parliament, the Bundestag. Hence, the people being above the politicians, as it should always be. The dome was designed by Sir Norman Foster to be environmentally friendly and energy efficient, allowing daylight to shine through the mirrored cone, and the use of artificial lighting is therefore reduced, with carbon emissions also being reduced. To our right we can see the new buildings of the administration sectors of the German government, a bit like the civil service offices around Whitehall and Parliament in the UK. To our right we see the new buildings of the German government post-reunification administration sector, if you like, a bit like the German civil service. The London equivalent would be seeing all the civil service offices around Whitehall and Parliament. And prior to 1990, the West German government was situated in Bonn and the East German government was situated in East Berlin. So you had the need post-reunification for all these new government administration buildings. What we see before us is a modern German masterpiece. It's the Marie Elisabeth Luders building. She was a celebrated German women's rights activist and politician, and the building with her name is part of the German parliamentary administration complex that we mentioned earlier. It was completed in 2003 and designed by Stephen Braunfels, who calls it his biggest and most beautiful building ever. I believe one of the crosses is for the German government workers and the other one for the public. The concrete structure is meant to symbolise the brutalism of East Germany's Soviet-style buildings with slightly more sophistication. These are new buildings for a new city. It's 40 years since I was last in Berlin, and the city is unrecognisable. Now we're coming up on the right hand side to one of Berlin's most iconic buildings. It's certainly one of my favourites. It's the Cube Berlin, and it's an office-shaped building on Washington Platz, completed in February 2020. Now this building is 10 stories and has a width, height and length of 42.5 metres and has a glass facade folded inwards. Now the facade, designed over the entire surface with folds and kinks, reflects the surroundings like a kaleidoscope. It's very close to central Berlin's railway station, and it really is some building. State railway company, the Deutsche Bahn, has offices in there. Now, the energy for the building is produced by solar radiation, and coated window panes reduce the heating of the interior space. On our left we see the House of the World Cultures building, also known as the Jimmy Carter Smile. Jimmy Carter, the ex-US president. On our left hand side we can see the famous Tiergarten. Now this is a place of incredible historical significance. There's statues everywhere, and we'll try and cover that in a future vlog. But we can just about make out the victory column. Now this was designed by Heinrich Strack in 1864 to commemorate the Prussian victory in the Second Prusso-Dano War. Now, some years later, in September 1873, Prussia had also defeated Austria and its German allies in the Austro-Prussian War and had beaten France in the Franco-Prussian War. Now, to give the statue a new purpose and to celebrate these later victories, there was the addition of a bronze sculpture of Victoria, the Roman goddess of victory, standing 8.3 metres tall, designed by Frederick Drake. We're heading back now towards Berliner Dome, Berlin Cathedral, and you can see the iconic TV tower in the distance. So I'll keep quiet and just allow you to enjoy the wonderful vistas and views of a river trip on the Spree in Berlin. And that's it from our river cruise on the Spree in Berlin, and it's goodbye from the Angler Flaneurs, and we hope to see you soon.